Hey there everyone, Stone Love Charm from Creepy Assassin Games here in lovely St. Paul. Isn't it lovely? Also cold AF, which is why I'm currently hunkered down behind a wall, because otherwise this would sound like I'm in a hurricane. Much better. Now I'm coming to you from an office. What office? Doesn't matter. Actually, it's my office. But I'm making this video because it's a lot easier to vlog than it is to blog, and it's a lot easier to watch than it is to read. So maybe I'll do this more often because I'm lazy. As evidenced by the name of my new vlog channel, Bored Lazy Genius. Because I'm bored, I'm lazy, and I'm technically a genius. Anyway, so the news story of the day is StoryCube the role-playing game, by which I mean the one being published by Rory's Story Cubes, not the one that Creepy Assassin published a little while ago, which we named because it uses Rory's Story Cubes primarily as its main mechanic, and we're not very creative, or at least we weren't at the time. We're getting better. So, Rory's Story Cubes by Creativity Hub is coming out very soon, sometime before the end of the year by the sounds of it, with an official Rory's Story Cube RPG. Now, I knew that this was in the works. I knew that it was a possibility, and it's kind of cool that it's actually happening. So the concept with that sounds like, based on a few blogs that I read about it, it's going to be a short 1 hour long game that the Creativity Hub, or maybe Rory's Story Cube, I don't exactly know how they relate to each other, but let's just say Rory's Story Cubes is going to be publishing, that will probably be called Rory's Story Cubes, the role-playing game. Or maybe 9 Cubes is one of the ones that people are kicking around, because it's being made by the same guy who made the 9 Qs, 9 Questions game. So yeah, one big question that's come up for us is what that means for us. And the answer is quite a bit, because we were in the midst of working on a expansion to our StoryCube role-playing game, which was meant to be much more tactical, and so we already kind of have the work made for creating a new game that won't be called StoryCube the role-playing game, so that there's no confusion for the fans of either us or Rory's Story Cubes, which I hope there is a good amount of overlap with, particularly if you like playing Creepy Assassin's StoryCube the role-playing game. Ideally, you also enjoy Rory's Story Cubes, because they're going to be used a lot in that game. So the new game that we're working on is based on the work that I had already done for the tactical expansion, and it's going to be called Ameoba. And the idea is that it is now going to be completely replacing our existing StoryCube the role-playing game. And StoryCube the role-playing game is either going to be going away completely, or is going to be made free to play as sort of a fan game for Rory's Story Cubes, just so that people can continue to enjoy the adventures that we've already written using that rule set. I have an email out to Rory, and I'm just waiting to hear back kind of what his feeling is on other games made with Story Cubes. So it's possible that the direction of Amoeba will have to change even more, but for right now we're planning on continuing to use Rory's Story Cubes as our primary dice for playing the game. For developing your character, developing your setting, and determining your character actions. So the name Amoeba is basically because it starts off very small and then grows from there. The idea being that essentially you start off with a handful of cubes, usually like 5, and by the time you're done you have a fully fledged world, you have fully fledged characters, and you've probably been playing for a few months to a few years. Maybe a few weeks. You know, it depends on how long you want to spend in a single adventure and in a single setting. But the idea is that you can start with something very, very small and build it up to something very big relatively quickly. Now, the official game being published using Rory's Story Cubes through Creativity Hub, which, you know, yet to be named. I'm going to call it, you know, Rory's Story Cubes, the role-playing game, for now. The idea behind that sounds like it's a much shorter game, something that you can get into in an hour and be done in an hour. You make your characters, you make your world, you play in it, much like the way that Rory's Story Cubes are currently used by most of the people who enjoy them. You know, short games, quick narratives, just something you can enjoy without really getting into it too deep. Our core market, on the other hand, is much more kind of the hardcores. And that, I think, is evidence of where we are at in our lives. Rory, I believe, has relatively young children, I think. And so it seems like he's always developing with that in mind, with the idea of, you know, he's developing for younger people, for families, that sort of thing. Whereas Greg Scholes, my primary design partner, has a son who's in his teens. I have a wife that's of my age and no children. So we're developing much more for people in that age category, people who are willing to spend a lot more time on something that's going to kind of, to some degree, take over your life, much in the same way that Dungeons and Dragons or maybe World of Warcraft does. You are a hobbyist in it. So that's kind of what's happening with us for right now. We're starting developing on Amoeba. Greg is just inches away from finishing up his Pentra system that his Dales of the Great Worm Lakes is built around. So that's probably going to be coming out pretty soon. I think the biggest push right now is probably going to be just getting the last details in and then finding art and assembling the book and all that and making it look nice. But yeah, hopefully this year will be the year that we finally actually publish physical stuff that starts showing up in game stores. And Amoeba is going to be released ideally as a standard development kit that everyone can use to develop their own worlds, and we're going to use it to develop our own worlds. So in the future, it's going to be less generic, GURPS style play, and more, more like D&D, where you do have a setting that you play in, and then the setting is built around the rules. But that's the books that are going to be released, is ones that are much more detailed like that and much less generic. But the generic setting will be out there for people to use and build on as they see fit. I'll go ahead and update y'all if that changes it, but for right now, I guess that's it. Later.